I'm Emily. Sitting at the dining table, I could feel the tension in the air, thick as the fog on a winter morning. My father, Henry, was holding my phone, his face as pale as the linen tablecloth. The room was deathly silent, the only sound being the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. I remembered the moment I walked back into the dining room with my coffee. The sight that greeted me was etched in my memory like a scar. My Uncle George, a retired mechanic with a no-nonsense attitude, had put down his fork and was looking at my father with an expression of disbelief. My sister Lily's husband, Tom, a 34-year-old insurance salesman for a local firm, had both hands flat on the table, his mouth slightly ajar. Lily, usually so full of energy and chatter, was as still as a statue. My mother, Rose, had one hand pressed against her throat, her eyes wide. My father finally found his voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Francis, is this the management company for our apartment?" he asked without taking his eyes off the phone screen. I took a deep breath. Yes. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. I could see the wheels turning in my father's head as he tried to process the information. For 38 years, he had underestimated me, always comparing me to Lily, who seemed to have the perfect life with her 3 kids and big house in the suburbs. My mind drifted back to the beginning. I graduated from Boston University in 2008 with a degree in finance and $25,000 in student loans. The debt felt enormous. I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the city, on the 5th floor with a view of the alley. The rent was $800 a month, and the property management company was called Metro Properties. I took a job there, not because I loved it, but because it paid $40,000 a year and included health insurance. I had no idea at the time that it would become the foundation of my future. I was good with numbers, and I quickly learned the ins and outs of property management. Before long, I realized many landlords were losing money simply because they didn't understand the market or manage their properties efficiently. In 2009, I started saving methodically. Every month, right after my paycheck hit my account, a fixed amount was automatically transferred into a separate savings account that was intentionally difficult to access. It worked. I never told my family about my savings because my father had very strong opinions about money. When I was 25, he told me investing in stocks was basically gambling. At 27, he suggested I marry someone with a stable income instead of chasing financial independence myself. After that, I stopped talking to him about money entirely. In 2012, I bought my first property, a small triplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I used $35,000 of savings for the down payment and financed the rest. One unit already had tenants, the other 2 needed work. I spent weekends painting walls, fixing appliances, and making repairs myself. By the end of the year, all 3 units were occupied, and for the first time, I was earning a modest monthly profit. In 2013, I incorporated Cedar View Holdings. I picked the name because it sounded simple and forgettable, nothing flashy. I filed the paperwork myself, paid the fees, and opened a business account at a local credit union. My family never knew. Over the years, Cedar View Holdings quietly expanded. By 2021, we owned 6 properties across the city, including a small office building and a 4-unit apartment complex. Then came the biggest opportunity of all. In 2022, a property management company listed a 24-unit apartment building in a good neighborhood. I made an offer without realizing my parents lived there. It wasn't until I reviewed the rent roll that I saw their names. Unit 108. Henry and Rose Thompson. I stared at that information for a long time. I thought about every criticism, every dismissive comment, every moment my father made me feel like I wasn't enough. But I also thought about the business and the importance of making rational decisions. In the end, I bought the building and kept the rents unchanged for the first year. That Thanksgiving felt ordinary on the surface. 12 family members crowded around the dining table. My parents sat at the head. Lily and Tom sat across from me. The table was decorated with one of my mother's handmade centerpieces, dried flowers, candles, and autumn leaves. As usual, my father steered the conversation toward Lily's accomplishments. Lily has built such a wonderful life for herself and her family, he said while looking directly at me. 3 healthy kids, a beautiful house, and a husband with a good job. That's what building a life looks like. Lily gave me that familiar half-smile that pretended to be sympathetic but somehow always felt condescending. I looked down at my plate and thought about the email I had received earlier that day. Payment received, $52,000. Thompson Apartments. December. During dessert, my father brought up my future again. Tom mentioned there might be an opening at his insurance company. It's an entry-level administrative position, he said enthusiastically. But it could lead to great things. Good benefits. Stable company. I'll think about it, I replied politely. Then I placed my phone face down on the table and excused myself to get more coffee. In the kitchen, I could still hear them talking. I knew my father wouldn't let the subject die easily. He had a habit of circling back to topics until he got the reaction he wanted. So instead of returning immediately, I stepped outside. The cold December air hit me sharply. Snowflakes drifted through the glow of the porch light while I leaned against my car and checked my phone again. I reopened the email and stared at the numbers. For a moment, I thought about everything, the sacrifices, the years of work, the loneliness, the discipline, the constant feeling that I had something to prove. But deep down, I realized I didn't actually want revenge. I just wanted my father to finally see me clearly. When I walked back into the dining room, I immediately knew something had changed. The silence was overwhelming. My father was holding my phone, his face drained of color. I sat down slowly. Dad, did you need something? He looked at me with shock written all over his face. You own this building, he whispered. Yes, I answered calmly. I do. The next few minutes blurred together. Finally, my Uncle George broke the silence. Henry, he said flatly, your daughter is your landlord. My mother looked stunned. We didn't know, she said softly. How long? About 18 months. My father sat motionless, staring at the screen. He lifted his wine glass once, then set it back down untouched. For several minutes, nobody really spoke. Lily texted under the table. Tom stared blankly into the distance. Uncle George quietly continued eating pie. Twice, my father tried to say something and failed. Eventually, George spoke again. Henry, it's time to recognize what your daughter has accomplished. She built a successful business. You should be proud of her. My father finally looked at me differently. For the first time in years, I saw respect in his eyes. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know, I replied. 3 weeks later, he called me on a Sunday afternoon while I was reviewing financial reports at my desk. When I saw his name appear on my phone, I hesitated before answering. Francis, he said. Dad. There was a long silence. I didn't know, he repeated. I know. Another pause. Okay, he finally said. Okay, I answered. That was the entire conversation. No dramatic apology. No emotional speech. But it was a beginning. On Christmas Day, my cousin Jake asked my father how the apartment building was. Good landlord, he joked. My father thought for a moment before replying. She keeps the building well. I was standing in the kitchen, and I heard every word. It was small, but it meant more to me than he probably realized. A few days later, my mother sent me a handwritten letter. She told me how proud she was and admitted she had kept my science fair certificate from when I was 14. She said it had been sitting in a shoebox in her closet all these years, and she was sorry it took so long to tell me. In January, when the leases came up for renewal, I reviewed each one carefully. For Unit 108, I renewed the lease at the same rate for another 2 years. Not because of guilt, not because of forgiveness, because a reliable long-term tenant is valuable business. Today, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the top floor of a building I own. It overlooks the city skyline, and every object inside reflects something I genuinely love. On one wall hangs that old science fair certificate, framed now. A reminder of where I started. And how far I came. I've learned that you don't build a life to prove something to other people. You build it for yourself, for the satisfaction of knowing you worked hard and created something meaningful. Sometimes the people who are supposed to recognize your worth are the last ones to see it. But eventually, that stops mattering. Because the most important thing is that you believe in yourself.